The estuary at the Grand Bay Research Reserve is a special place. Our research scientists monitor its marshes along with its waters to learn about complex ecological processes that occur here. Our stewardship scientists protect and restore the estuary using many methods, including shoreline stabilization to promote a healthy ecosystem, as well as create habitat for many species living in the estuary. The marshes here are subject to heavy erosion through wave action and sediment loss. Some shorelines are losing meters per year. So, through an enhanced understanding along with the employment of management practices, the Grand Bay NER seeks to restore functions to these unique ecosystems. Speaking in terms of evolutionary and geological time, estuaries are young systems, only lasting for a short period of time. They were formed at the end of the last ice age, about 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. Most estuaries are places where rivers meet the sea. They are partially enclosed by land. The mixing of fresh water from the rivers and salt water from the oceans become known as brackish water. This, along with the nutrients from each system, creates some of the most productive ecosystems on the planet. The Grand Bay Estuary is a special case. It is a naturally retrograding river delta. The Escatawba River to the north was captured by the Pascagoula to the west about 3,000 to 5,000 years ago. The remnants of the Escatawba's old path can still be seen in the estuary today. With a sufficient source no longer present, freshwater inflows are limited to rainwater, runoff, and small creeks. Without a major source of sediment, erosion from storm surges and wave action is outcompeting sediment accretion in the Grand Bay marshes. This has led to heavy erosion of the headland areas of Pointe-au-Chien Bay and the Grand Batur Islands. These areas are shifting from enclosed brackish waters to more open, saline environments. The Grand Bay Estuary is comprised mostly of salt marsh. These coastal wetlands are characterized by substrate made of deep mud and peat, and also being influenced by saltwater tides. There are three distinct zones divided by minor elevation change: the low, the mid, and the high marsh. The low marsh lies at the lowest elevation and goes from one extreme to another. During high tide, it is usually completely submerged, and during low tide, it is usually completely exposed. Therefore, species that live there must be adapted to survive these harsh extremes. Smooth cordgrass is the dominant species in the low marsh. It has adapted to survive saltwater inundation for most of the year. While other species wouldn't be able to tolerate this, smooth cordgrass excretes the salt it takes in from glands on its leaves. These leaves and the algae that grow upon them in turn provide food for grazers, like the periwinkle snow. In the fall, when the cordgrass dies, it creates wrack, which is transported by waves and currents and eventually breaks down, adding to nutrient recycling and increasing productivity within the system. The mid-marsh occurs above the average high tide mark. It isn't regularly flooded. This zone is dominated by black needle rush. The needle-like tips that are the namesake of this perennial actually consist of leaves rolled into sharp points. At certain times of the year, the stems of the plant are tipped with groups of flowers called inflorescences. These, along with the roots or rhizomes, are responsible for reproduction. Black needle rush also provides valuable habitat and protection for many animal species living in the salt marsh. The high marsh lies at the highest elevation within the salt marsh and can support more diverse vegetation communities than the other zones. It is comprised of many species of plants, including marsh elder, salt meadow cordgrass, and yopon holly. Other types of habitat occur in the salt marsh as well. Salt pans can be found in some of the mid-marsh zones. Saltwater pools and depressions after spring or flood tides. Once this water evaporates, salt is left behind to create a hypersaline environment. This forms a seemingly barren habitat where most plants are unable to grow. However, halophytes, or salt-loving species, thrive in this environment. Shell middens are large mounds of oyster shells found in the Grand Bay marshes. These can support their own unique vegetation communities. Hardwood trees and woody shrubs are able to grow on these mounds because of their higher elevation and calcium-rich soil. Shell middens are not naturally occurring phenomena. The mounds were formed from thousands of years of discarded oyster shells. Native Americans would once harvest and smoke oysters in the Grand Bay marshes. Once the oysters were consumed, they were discarded, eventually piling up and forming large mounds. Over time, Native Americans would discard other items here as well. Archaeologists have discovered tools, pottery, various types of animal bones, and even burials, dating back some of these items to about 4,000 years ago. Seagrass beds are another habitat found in the Grand Bay Estuary. Two species of seagrass have been found at Grand Bay. The dominant species, widgeon grass, prefers low salinity waters in Mississippi. Seagrass beds found in Grand Bay can range from very small, about 2.5 acres, to very large, almost 250 acres. They are found on shallow, muddy bottoms next to marshes. These beds provide food and shelter for many organisms. In the low and mid-marsh, vegetation communities are dominated by smooth cordgrass and black needle rush, respectively. However, biodiversity is high in the estuary. The shallow waters and sheltered tidal creeks provide perfect spawning and nursery grounds for many fish and shellfish species. These areas provide protection in contrast to more open water environments. In fact, many species spend at least part of their life cycle in an estuarine environment. Many migratory bird species seek out estuaries as a sort of rest stop on their long migration routes. They use them to break and refuel on long, exhausting flights. While the estuary provides shelter, it is also an important source of food. High biological productivity allows the estuary to support many species, both small and large. From plankton and fish to birds and reptiles, these habitats are diverse ecosystems with extremely complex food webs. Estuaries protect coastal communities by reducing flooding and storm surge impacts during large rain events and hurricanes. They also enhance water quality by cleaning pollutants from non-point sources, including roads. Estuaries provide commercial benefits, creating over 50 million jobs and contributing to much of the nation's gross domestic product. Also, they provide recreational benefits like kayaking and fishing. The Grand Bay Estuary represents one of the most biologically productive ecosystems in the northern Gulf of Mexico. This habitat supports rare and endangered species, important marine fisheries, and archaeological sites. It is Grand Bay NER's mission to preserve and understand this intricate resource.